Hello everyone, Vampire Ian here, and I just wanted to have a bit of a discussion with you today. So there's new Drytron support cards releasing the upcoming set Infinite Forbidden, and they're not great. Or so you would think if you were planning on playing the deck as it is conceived of currently. However, many Twitter replies and commenters would be very quick to remind you that these cards are very good for a more pure version of the build. The nasty lock-on ritual summons that detractors of the card point to as a failure of the new support also lends itself to building pure. More importantly though, it also locks out the powerful ritual monsters the deck is known for, like Herald of Ultimateness, and more relevantly in the modern day, Amor Factor Pain and Magician of Black Chaos Max. Many celebrating the new cards are just excited to play a new version of Drytron. This is a perfectly fair mindset to take, perfectly reasonable, but not particularly interesting for a video. What I find captivating is the significant subset of this group that seems to view the new wave of Drytron as somehow morally superior to the previous Drytrons. And some of them are getting rather nasty and personal about it, especially on Twitter where hell is real and it's all of us. Now, why is this? Let's try and break down and understand where they're coming from. So there's two general waves of discontent with the pre-Infinite Forbidden state of Drytron. The first, and much less common and frankly less interesting, is a general hate of non-pure decks. This is a silly mindset for children, and I'm not even going to touch it in this video. It doesn't matter. The second and prevailing issue is a distaste for the turn skip. Now, what is a turn skip? What is the Ur-Turn-Skipism? The term is being bandied about quite frequently recently, especially in the context of the new transaction rollback combo, but not a lot of discussion has been had about the term. The most important thing to establish first in defining this Yu-Gi-Oh community slang is that a turn skip is not a literal turn skip. When you perform a turn skip of the style that's been talked about in the community recently, you are not activating one of the few terrible cards that literally skips the opponent's turn. In fact, you're not usually even talking about the cards that skip a part of your opponent's turn, although in the case of Drytron specifically, we can point to Amor Factor Pain as one of those that would more likely be included. Most commonly though, Yu-Gi-Oh players consider a turn skip to be a card that floodgates the opponent out of a major mechanic of the game for a turn, thus leading to them passing the turn without accomplishing much of anything, essentially skipping their turn. These effects usually include locking down all special summons for the turn or locking down all effects for the turn. Probably the best deck for accomplishing this right now would be Centurion, which can summon Hot Red Dragon, Archfiend, King Calamity on the opponent's turn to prevent them from activating any cards or effects, while Labyrinth Transaction Rollback is a close second. You'll note the lack of either of these decks in most top cuts, because a turn skip, as it turns out, is not in and of itself an instant game winner. Most turn skip decks are unable to perform when interrupted, and they often have other critical weaknesses of the mirror match and having to go second at all, ever. That's what these comments and tweets mean by a turn skip. And yeah, turn skips are really annoying to play against. Not being able to play your cards isn't fun. But then, if the new Drytron doesn't do a turn skip, how does it win the game? You gotta have a win condition. Well, at least in this early stage, new Drytron players are taking advantage of the fact that the lock only applies to ritual summons to end on a Link monster board plus the new boss monster with a Magic Key counter trap thrown in for a more varied end board. So that's an Appaloosa with 4 negates, the new boss monster with 2 negates, the counter trap with an Omni negate, and an IP Masquerena which converts to SP Little Knight. That's a theoretical total of 6 monster negates, 1 Omni negate, and SP Little Knight. The idea is you have 1 negate for every card in your opponent's hand, give or take a spell card, plus Little Knight to banish any threats to Apo that would reduce the amount of negates, essentially skipping their turn. Oh wait, what was that I just said? Skipping a turn. Does that make this a turn skip too? Sure, you don't get to activate your effects, but if they don't resolve, is there actually a difference between activating them at all? Now, let's take a step back here and acknowledge, yes, there is a mechanical difference between the two. Spells have a lot more power against the latter, and there's potentially a way to play through the 7 negates so long as you have a decoy spell to bait out the Omni negate. On the other hand, just draw the out also applies to most turn skip decks where a solid hand trap will end the turn skip as we established earlier. Just draw the out is small comfort to someone who did not draw the out. You might as well say just win the die roll so they can't turn skip you. So if we are talking about turn skips as a moral position rather than a mechanic, as these people are, what is the moral difference between a board of 7 negates and a turn skip? I personally am not going to put a moral value on either playstyle in this video, but these comments clearly view the traditional turn skip as bad, unfun, or even in some instances, unskillful, and the board of 7 negates as perfectly fine. Another interesting wrinkle to this to me is that the many negate board is the exact situation that Drytron was in at the height of its power, where it made Herald of Ultimateness and Red Eyes Dark Dragoon. Those two cards represented a ton of negates limited only by cards in hand, which filled up rather easily. Many of these same comments also dislike that period of Drytron as well. How can there be a moral difference between a board with a ton of negates and a board with a lot of negates, less fairies? Is the Omni Negate versus Monster Negate truly the only difference when 7 out of 10 times that will not matter? Like, you could tell me that Labyrinth plays around 7 Monster Negates, but I can just as well tell you that Fluandereeze plays around the Mayakashi turn skip. What's the difference? And these negates are built into the new boss monster, so you can't say that they are not a fundamental part of new Drytron. There's of course a lot of room for Drytron to build a different link board than just Format Apo Masquerena Pass in the future, but that exact board is what is being shown off as the new Drytron alternative. It's always going to be the first instinct of duelists who have been trained over the last couple of years to count the number of negates on the end board to determine the strength of a deck, an infuriatingly common attitude. I think that gets to the core of the problem though. The end board with a ton of negates has been largely normalized over the past couple of years. A lot of duelists have had a hard time moving on from it in their conception of the game. Just look at my old Evol deck profiles for proof of that. And then go check out the more recent ones because they're much better and cooler. That normalization doesn't just affect deck building though, it also changes what players perceive as a normal or moral strategy. We've been playing infinite negate boards for so long that it just seems like Yu-Gi-Oh to us. But just ask any Yugi boomer, and you'll find that they conceive of our modern Yu-Gi-Oh playstyle as morally wrong in the same way a lot of players look at a turn skip strategy as morally wrong. And you can't just reply with, yeah, but negate boards are fun and turn skips aren't, so I win. Because some players like playing turn skips and stun decks. I and many others love Flu after all, which does a lot of both of these even without Barrier Statue. While you may value in-game interactions as where the fun of the game lies, stun players clearly see value in deck building and consistently locking the opponent out and finding the perfect moment to lock them out. Fun is relative, and the fun on one side of the table does not inherently relate to the fun on the other side. And since fun is relative and subjective, and our conception of what is a morally acceptable deck is fluid, maybe we should all be a little bit more introspective about these kinds of moral judgments, especially when applying them to the person playing the deck instead of the deck itself. Instead of coming to the conclusion that your opponent is ontologically evil for playing floodgates or turn skips, maybe look at how other players might see your deck as the unfun killjoy and try to be a little nicer to your opponent, or in this case, the random person on the other side of your Twitter flame war. I think that's something we could all be a little better about, honestly. That's right, the title wasn't about turn skips themselves, but about the people who play them. Aren't I clever? Thanks for the views, dingle dorks. But really, this ultimately is just an exercise in examining our own biases. I'm no exception here. I love to complain about both floodgates and end boards that are nothing but negates after a long drawn out combo, and yet, here I am playing Flu and Speedroids, perfect examples of both of those. And yet, I still hate floodgates and negation heavy end boards. My thoughts on that haven't changed. I'm just making sure we realize there's no moral value assigned to any particular strategy. Just a difference in how we enjoy the same game. I guess as always, I'm just advocating that we be a little nicer to each other. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. This is a bit more of an experimental thing for me, so if you liked it, leave a comment, like, share, subscribe, all that stuff. If you didn't like it, you know, that's your prerogative, I guess. Maybe leave a comment telling me nicely, please be nice. As I said in the end of the video, please be nice and leave a nice comment saying what you disagreed with, and maybe we can have a discussion. That's what this is trying to be. It's a discussion, you know? And I'll see you in the next one. Thank you. Bye. Hey there. Thanks for watching another video. Why don't you give it a like, share it around, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell for notifications. You know, the YouTube stuff. You can also follow me on Twitch and Twitter for more content. I got content plenty for ya. You can also support the channel by giving me money. You have a Patreon. If you join the Patreon, you can show up in the credits over here. I would really appreciate that. You can also use my TCG Player affiliate link to get any singles, sealed product, or accessories you want, all to supporting the channel at the same time. That's all for this one, and I'll see you in the next one. Be kind to yourselves, be kind to others, and have a wonderful rest of whatever time it is for you. Bye now!